The Boston Bruins are officially not in a playoff spot right now, and the fan base is divided. We have some saying they will be fine, some saying trade them all, and some saying start the retool or the rebuild. I've seen many comments of trade this player, fire this person, and I want to help everyone know what we're looking at if the Bruins actually do decide to retool. In this video, I'm going to run through scenarios, let you know who can be traded and who can't. I will share my opinion as well and welcome the discussion in the comment section below as always. So buckle up, Bruins fans. I'm here to give you the latest info on your beloved Boston Bruins. If you've been liking my Bruins content, please leave me a like and subscribe. If you've already done so, thank you, and let's get into it. The Boston Bruins lost to the Ottawa Senators this weekend, giving up the lead late in the third period like we feel like we've seen a whole bunch of times this year. They looked terrible in the final minutes, and you even had Marchand get benched by the coach, and he doesn't get to go out in OT when he is literally our best player in shootouts and in overtime in team's history. Marchand was far from the worst player in the third period, but he was the one who got sat. I thought Nikita Zadorov played his worst game as a Bruin, which is saying a lot since he's had some terrible games, and when he has a bad game, it's freaking nuclear. He also wasn't the only one, but for some reason, Zadorov got rewarded with a ton more ice time. Like, I get it. Charlie McAvoy is hurt and Hampus Lindholm is hurt, but sitting Marchand for his one mistake and rewarding other players that, wow, they just played terrible in the third period. It's mind-boggling to me, but it also shows you that Sacco right now, he's grasping at straws just like Jim Montgomery did. Losing to the Senators is twofold because they're a team that's above you in the standings and in your division along with having games in hand. In fact, the three teams in their division who are ahead of them in the standings have games in hand, which means the Bruins, as of right now, totally don't control their destiny. Yeah, they can win. They can go on a tear. But with the teams that are ahead of them, if they play the way they've been playing this season, the Boston Bruins don't make the playoffs. They have a 63% chance right now to not make the playoffs. The Bruins are 1 point out of the last wildcard spot at the time of this recording, which is held by Columbus. But Columbus has a game in hand as well. The Bruins' record in their last 10 games is 3-5-2, and the team ahead of them are all playing above 500 hockey right now. Ottawa has now won 2 games in a row and is the team Boston needs to get past. Boston, on the other hand, hasn't played consistent hockey all season and still one of the worst goal differentials in the league, which is still a cause for concern. They also have the worst power play. They're at the bottom of the league in goals for. They have way too many things not on their side at the point. Way more causes for concern than optimism. We've heard about many teams going on a run like Edmonton last year or St. Louis the year they won the Cup. But do you truly feel this Bruins team is anything like those teams? I honestly don't, but you can let me know in the comments if I'm wrong. I don't think this Bruins team has enough depth compared to those teams, and this group hasn't shown they can win a string of games. They also don't have 2 of the best players in the world like Edmonton did. So let's not compare them to Edmonton at all. We haven't seen the Bruins play this bad and inconsistent in years. In fact, we haven't seen this since 2015-16, which is the last time the Bruins did not make the playoffs. And that's the year they did a retool. In 2015-16, it was their second year in a row to not make the playoffs. I think one of the biggest differences was they still had Bergeron, Krejci, Marchand, Chara, and Rask. The core of the team that time was great and something you could still build around. At the 2015 draft, Sweeney's first, we see the Bruins trade Milan Lucic and Dougie Hamilton. I'm not here to rehash that draft, but that was the last time the Boston Bruins did a retool. That same offseason, other trades rumored the Bruins looked into, but elected not to, involved Brad Marchand and Tuukka Rask, just to name a few. Marchand at the time couldn't play a season without getting suspended or fined, so discipline was becoming a real issue with him. Rask had detractors and supporters in the Bruins management and their fan base, and neither trade made any real progress, but the rumors were it was discussed. Also during that time, the Bruins didn't have a plethora of players with no move clauses to hamper any sort of retool. The core of the 2024-25 Bruins is Charlie McAvoy, David Pastrnak, Brad Marchand, and Jeremy Swayman. Far cry from the Bergeron days, but it is what it is at this point. Years of going all in and not winning the Cup have led this franchise to this point. As a fan base, we got to see very competitive teams year after year, but it looks like it might be coming to an end. The Washington Capitals in the past a couple of years did a successful retool, so there's still hope for the Bruins can too. Washington had a bit of a luck because they had a couple albatross contracts either go on LTIR or demand to be moved. They also had one huge one kind of have a substance abuse problem, and then asked to be moved. They still did a great job of finding pieces to get them back into a playoff contention and help OV with the goal chase. So who can the Boston Bruins even trade? Well, let's start with who they can't trade with the help of Puckpedia. I've seen a lot of comments of trade this guy or trade that guy, but unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. The Bruins currently have 6 players that have no move clauses, which means the Bruins can't trade them or put them on waivers. Except one. There's an asterisk. I'll get to him later. Unless these players ask for a trade or the Bruins convince them to be traded, they're not going anywhere. That list includes Nikita Zadorov, Hampus Lindholm, Charlie McAvoy, David Pastrnak, Elias Lindholm, and Charlie Coyle. Coyle's the one with the asterisks. Before you bring up the Rangers moving Trouba, he didn't have a no-move clause and only had a no-trade clause. That allowed the Rangers to threaten to put him on waivers, and that was the reason he agreed to the trade. You can't threaten any of the players I mentioned above with waivers or anything besides not playing them. But you'd have to still pay them if you don't play them. So regardless how you feel with the players I mentioned, they're not getting traded, so they're off the table. Brad Marchand, Pavel Zacha, Charlie Coyle, Brandon Carlo, and Jonas Korpisalo all have modified no trade clauses, which means they submit lists of teams they can be traded to, and teams not on that list would need players' permission to be traded. Coyle is an interesting one because he has a no-move clause, meaning he can't be put on waivers, but still has an 18 no-trade list. So technically he can be traded. He needs to approve it. He's got 8 teams that you don't even want to go to him about, and you can't put him on waivers or try and send him to the minors. Carlo or Zacha could be pieces used in a much larger trade to bring in another player of substance, but would only be pieces in that trade. They wouldn't be the focal point, bringing in you guys like Pettersson or Miller. I'm not saying those guys. I'm just naming guys that, are out there on the rumor mill. If the Bruins did move Frederic, he could command a first-round pick based on his skill set, and teams looking for that type of player for the playoffs. My good friend Dominic Tiano mentioned on What's the Bruins podcast that Marchand is waiting to see what money is left to do a Bergeron-type deal to remain a Bruin for life. I also don't believe the Bruins, if they do a retool, that Marchand being traded would even be an option. The only way he gets traded is if he asks for it. And the other names to mention could be traded again, but most likely they'd have to approve any move on the team from their no-trade list. And honestly, so many people keep putting Marchand as he wants to go win another cup and all that. I honestly think the guy just wants to retire a Bruin. We saw Linus Armar not waive his no-trade last season, as he declined to trade to a West Coast team. So if the Bruins do a retool, I would expect them to explore trading all these players I mentioned besides Brad Marchand. The Bruins have Trent Frederic, Justin Brazeau, Vinny Lettieri, Brad Marchand, Cole Koepke, and Parker Wotherspoon, who are all unrestricted free agents at the end of the season. So everyone besides Marchand would be available to be traded. Dom on the same What's Bruins podcast mentioned he had heard that the Bruins are closing the gap on a contract extension with Trent Frederic, which, if happens, would mean they're less likely to trade him. It wouldn't mean he's off the table, but less likely depending on the terms of his deal. The Bruins do love their no moves or modified no trade clauses, so probably teams wouldn't want that if that's in the deal. The Bruins talking extension with Frederic tells me that Justin Brazeau is likely to move this season before the trade deadline. Dom mentioned Edmonton, but I would think a team like New Jersey would also be very interested in his services. Brazeau would most likely be traded for a pick, and that pick would most likely be a second rounder. New Jersey has 3 picks in the second round in this year's NHL entry draft, so they might even be willing to overpay a bit if they wanted to sweeten the pot. Koepke would get you a higher pick than Lettieri or Wotherspoon, and you would be looking at something in the 3rd round or an AHL prospect. I would think both Lettieri and Wotherspoon would be available, but neither player would be something a contending team would be looking to put them over the edge. Mark Kastelik, Oliver Wahlstrom, Morgan Geekie, Andrew Peeke, Jeremy Swayman, and Mason Lowry, along with Johnny Beecher and Jordan Osterley, all don't have no trade protection, and so does Matthew Poitras. I would think, though, the only way they trade Lowry is if they had an offer they can't refuse.
Hey, you were unbelievable tonight. Unbelievable.
Swayman, as much as so many in the comments would want him to be moved, he wouldn't be a guy they'd move if you're going to do a retool. Swayman also has a hefty contract and a no-move clause that kicks in 26-27. Big factors into any team that would be looking to make that deal. Geekie and Peeke would also most likely be the guys that would be moved, if any, because Kastelik just resigned and you want players like him on your team. Even in a retool, you're not selling the farm and you want to keep a lot of your pieces. Out of all the guys I mentioned, they would probably only trade like 4 of them and then keep the rest. I also don't think they'd move anyone like Matthew Poitras, Fabian Lysell, or Georgi Merkulov unless a team knocks their socks off. You don't move your young players in a retool. You would expect the Bruins to acquire picks and maybe some players, but most likely picks if you're looking at a retool. They would look at more of the UFAs this summer, but most likely take guys on 1 or 2 year deals and not sign anyone long term like they did this offseason. Looking at the list of UFAs right now would be kind of pointless, as these players could resign before then. What I have laid out is realistically what the Bruins could do if they decide to retool. But as you can see, there seems to be more guys they can't trade than can. I want to hear from you though. What do you think they'd do if they did a retool? That's a wrap on today's video. To stay up to date on all the news surrounding the Boston Bruins, please subscribe and drop me a like. If news breaks surrounding the Boston Bruins, be sure to check out the channel. If you've already subscribed to the channel, thank you, and I'll see you next time.